All right, good afternoon, good Erev Shabbos. Hope you're doing well. We're going to do a Rashi from the sixth Aliyah today in Parshas Chayei Sara. Although the Parsha is called Chayei Sara, it really deals, of course, with the death of Sarah. And although it's called Chayei Sara, it actually deals with the death of Avraham as well, which comes at the end of the Parsha in the sixth Aliyah. So the Torah begins to describe the process of dying of Avram. These are the days and the years of Avram's life, who lived 175 years. He eventually dies at a ripe old age, Zaken v'Savea, old and fulfilled, Vayasef elamav, and he's gathered into his nation, which is the Torah's way of saying he died. After he dies, Vayikbru so Yitzhak v'Yishmael banav Maras Machpelah, Ste'efron ben Sochar Achiti Asher Apnei Mamre. They bury him in the Maras Machpelah, in the field which was brought by Avram himself from Ephron Hachiti. So far, Avram and Sarah are both buried in Maras Machpelah. Mos Avraham Vayivarech Elokim es Yitzchak beno Vayeshev Yitzchak im ber lachai roi. So after he dies, Hashem finally decides to bless Yitzchak beno. So I want to do a couple of short Rashis here. First of all, to notice, as Rashi does here, the way that the years of Avram's life are stated. Elish Yemei Shnei Chayei Avraham, Asher Chai. First of all, there's a lot of repetition. Yemei, Shnei, Chayei Avraham, Asher Chai. But then even when it comes to the number, it says Me'at Shana, 100 years, V'shivim Shana, and 70 years, V'chamesh Shanim, and 5 years. It could have just said Me'a v'shivim v'chamesh Shanim, 175 years. But just like by Sarah over here, the pasuk at the beginning of the parsha does exactly the same thing. Vayus Chayei Sara, Me'a Shana, V'esrim Shana, V'sheva Shanim, Shnei Chayei Sara, Chayei and Shnei Chayei, so Chayim is repeated twice, and Me'ah between each one, 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, instead of just saying 127 years. It splits up Shana between each one. It does the same thing here by Avraham, and the interpretation of Rashi is the same in both places. Me'ah Shana v'shim Shana, Ben Kuf ke Ben Ayin. The reason it says Shana in between each of the divisions of years is to say that each of the divisions of years is equatable to the next one after it. So it starts with 170 and 5. The reason it doesn't just say 175 as a unit is to tell you there's something special about 100 and something special about 70 and something special about 5. And when he was 100, he was just like when he was 70. And when he was 70, he was just like 5. In this particular case, what it's trying to teach us is Ben Ayin ke Ben Hey below Chet. When he was 70, he was just like when he was 5 below Chet, without any Averos. It doesn't say what the comparison between 170 is here. We can leave that to our own imagination, but certainly in the last division, when he was 70, he was still like 5 in terms of not violating any Averos. Similar to the way here, in the splitting up of Sarah's years, it says, L'kach nichtav shana b'chol klal v'klal. Between each one, it says a shana. Lomar l'cha shekol echad nidrosh le'atzmo. Every division of years has to be examined on its own. Bas mea kebas esrim l'chet. When she was 100, she was like 20 in terms of Averos. Bas ma bas esrim lochatas. Just like at 20, she doesn't get punished, so too, at 100, she had no chatayim. And bas esrim kebas sheva, 20, she was like 7, it's li yofi in terms of her beauty. It's unclear why in the case of Avraham, the same divisions don't apply. It's not talking about yofi at all. And in terms of below chet, it actually goes with the lower one. It says ben ayin ke ben hey below chet. Or you could read Rashi and saying below chet is on both. When you're 5, you have no chatayim at all. So when she was 20, she was like 5, she had no chatayim. And when she was 100, she was like 20. At 20, you have chatayim, but you're not necessarily bas onshin or ben onshin. You don't have punishments for it yet. And therefore, the divisions are 100 like 20 in terms of lacking punishment, and 20 like 5 in terms of no chatayim at all. It could be that, but again, just pointing out that it's unclear in this Rashi, much clearer in the Rashi about Sarah. The common denominator between them is that Shana exists between each division, teaching you that there's what to learn from one to the other, and that at least one of those is speaking about their lack of sin. The differences between them is that the lack of sin here seems to be on the second categorization of age, not on the first, and the first one doesn't seem to have any application at all, unless you say below chet goes on both. Whereas by the case of Sara, you have a specific application of below chet for the first division to the second, and liyofi between the second and the third. Okay. That's just in terms of similarity. But the beginning of the parsha to the end, it's really the frame. Ela Shnei Chayei Avram, Shnei Chayei Sara. Sarah and Abraham are the frame of this parsha, and each of them have divided years to show us that they were truly righteous in incorporating some of the preferred qualities of their younger years even into their older years as well. Okay, next Rashi. It says that after he died, B'seva Tova Zakin V'Saveh, it says Vayikberu so Yitzchak v'Ishmael. Yitzchak and Ishmael bury him together. And Rashi deduces a very, very important lesson, very important point here about the biography of Ishmael from the fact that they show up together at the funeral of Avram. He says, Mikan she'asa Yishmael tshuva, v'holich es Yitzchak lefanav, v'hu seva tova shenemra be'Avraham. A beautiful, beautiful Rashi. We don't really know what happens to Ishmael. Of course, the text of Ishmael is different also than the views of Chazal of Ishmael. But certainly in Chazal's view, Ishmael is not a proper character. Certainly in Sarah's eyes, Ishmael was not a proper character. She kicks him out of the house. They go off into the field to their journey. Ishmael is saved. Ba'asher Husham. God judges him in that moment, not in the future. His life is saved. Hashem promises Hagar that he's also going to be a great nation, but we don't really know what happens to him. We don't know about his character. We don't know whether Avram ever welcomed him back into the home. We don't know about his tshuva, nothing. We don't know anything. But from this little detail here at the end of Avram's life, when he's buried, number one, the fact that Ishmael shows up at his funeral means he was still part of the sphere of Avram Avinu. That's number one. Number two, the fact that it says, Yikberu so Yitzchak ve'Yishmael banav, the fact that the Torah ordered it, Yitzchak and then Ishmael, indicates over here that he put Yitzchak before him. Ishmael, even though he was the older one, should have taken precedence in the funeral, but he puts Yitzchak before him, showing us that his character changed, that he did do tshuva, that instead of bringing Yitzchak down like he did in the early days in terms of his influence on him towards Avodah Zarah, towards the wildness of his character, over here, probably at the end of life, he actually honors Yitzchak. It shows that he has a different approach to Yitzchak, but also a different approach to life and to the values of the home of Avram Avinu. So the fact that he shows up and the fact that the order here is Yitzchak ve'Yishmael indicates Mikan shas Ishmael tshuva. Not only that, but in the previous pasuk, when it says that Avram died not only in old age, not only zaken v'saveya, but b'seva tova, in good stead, at good old age. Perhaps this is exactly what good old age was speaking about. It's not only had a lot of years, not only had good years, but he was able at the end of his life to see his son do tshuva and his two boys come together. That's what Seva Tova means by Avraham. The beautiful aspiration of parents to see their children get along, to see their children follow in their ways. The greatest nechama, the greatest comfort to Avram was that at the end of his life, he sees both his children following in that path, following in the right way. All of that is embodied here in the description of Avram Avinu's funeral. One last Rashi. What does Hashem bless Yitzchak with after the death of Avraham? It's a complicated question. It's worth its own share. But the simple answer, the first answer given by Rashi is Nichmo Tanchume Avelim. Vayivarach doesn't mean he gives him material blessing. It doesn't mean he gives him spiritual blessing. But Vayivarach, he blessed him. He blessed him with consolation after the death of his father. Hashem performs the mitzvah kiviyachol of Tanchume Avelim, or Nichum Avelim, of comforting the bereaved. And he comes to comfort Yitzchak in his moment of loss for his father, Avraham. Have a great Shabbos, everyone. We'll see you next week.